Hi, everybody. I'm Caroline Wolf. Welcome to the Libraries Connecting Texas May version of our monthly webinar. It looks like there are 8 attendees right now. I'm going to just give everybody just a minute to join. We had 22 people sign up, so I'm a little surprised that we only have 8 people. So just 1 second, and I'll wait just a minute. I'm sure that we have, I know that Texas is having similar weather challenges that to me, with the rain. I'm in Louisiana. Well,
we had a I
was gonna say, I don't see anybody else joining, so I guess let's go ahead and get started. Jenny, what were you going to say?
Nothing.
Okay.
Keep going.
So I want to introduce 2 new members of the Libraries Connecting Texas team, Patty Hollingsworth and Jennifer Williams. They are both in Texas. So they are they're going to be helping with the Libraries Connecting Texas project, and so we wanted them to be part of today's webinar to make sure that you can put names and faces together and voices. So welcome to the team, Jennifer and Patty, and I guess we'll go ahead and get started with the slides. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding for Libraries Connecting Texas, and then Jenny's going to talk about the preparing for funding year 2021, and Brandy's going to talk about how to read your bill. You know, this is a reimbursement program that requires you to look at your bill and take out ineligibles if you're going to be doing a bear, and also if you're going to be doing a SPI, you want to look and make sure that your service provider is discounting your bills correctly. So we're going to talk about that. Jennifer Williams is going to talk about deadlines, and Kyle is going to talk about next steps. And so I see people are joining as I guess they're available. So we actually have about 3 libraries who still are waiting for funding. I think we saw, I saw a couple of C2 applications were funded today. Doris Paget is one of them. And so I don't have those updated numbers quite yet for today's wave, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about how far we've come from the first year in 2018. To give an example of the average bandwidth in megabits per second in 2019, it was 302, and this year, in 2021, the average number of average bandwidth is 1 gig, which is 1,000 megabits per second. So it shows that things have definitely improved as far as bandwidth in Texas libraries. Another statistic that is interesting: in 2019, the average bandwidth in megabits per second. I'm sorry, the average cost of bandwidth was $5.23, and this year the average is $3.78. So using E-rate and the competitive bidding process, the Libraries Connecting Texas project has allowed libraries who are participating to not only increase their bandwidth, but to drive the cost down. So congratulations to all of you for the hard work that you've done in learning how to do E-rate, but also just for being members of Libraries Connecting Texas project. We're really excited to work with you, and it's really great to see all of these great results. So now let's go on to preparing for 2021.
Hey. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to talk about kind of what the preparation for the funding year 2021 that starts, believe it or not, in just a few weeks. So it's the applications that most of you have been funded for, and it's going to begin July 1 of 2021. So now's the time to ensure that your services, if you're switching services or upgrading from what you have today, you'll need to kind of find out and make sure that the service provider is ready to go. And if there's a delay, you'll need to know that now so that you can prepare for what needs to take place at that time. So if there's an issue with services starting on July 1, you can take a few steps to mitigate lost funding. There is a caveat, though, that if the service costs for the old service exceed what was funded for the new service, your library will have to pay the difference out of pocket. So that's why it's important to figure what that looks like now so you can determine what you need to do. And then you also want to figure out how you want to be invoiced by your service provider as of July 1. Do you want to pay upfront for the cost in full, or do you want the service provider to discount the invoices so that you just pay your undiscounted amount? So they need to know that, and many of those service providers have forms that you have to complete to let them know what you want. So transitioning from one service or one service provider to another takes a couple of different steps. And I know Brandy's talked about this in the past, but it's pretty important. If you are switching to a new ISP, a new internet service provider, then you want to be sure that your outgoing provider is aware that you're making the switch. I would recommend you wait until services are up and running with the new provider before you terminate the old services. That way you'll not have any downtime. But it also may make there be some type of cost overlapping. So you'll just have to work that out. We can help you with that if you need help. If you're upgrading your services from what you are today, staying with the same provider, but looking at getting more bandwidth, many of you are in that boat, which is great. You'll just want to make sure that the first bill for July, make sure it's accurate. Make sure that the upgrade happened, that the price is according to what you signed off on the contract or on the, whatever the quote was. Just make sure that that's reconciled, that they match. It is overbilling can sometimes happen, and it is better resolved if caught early. So we just want to make sure that if that happens to you, you can resolve that within the first couple of months of the funding year. And as I said earlier, some service providers will require you to complete some forms to let them know how you want to be invoiced. And if you do want discounted bills, then you'll have to complete the form and let them know the funding request number and some other details. If you need help filling out those forms, certainly let us know. We'll help you. If you don't want discounts and you just want to continue to pay the bill in full, then typically they don't require a form to be submitted. So you'll just need to make sure that if you want the discounted bills, you have to take action on that. Let them know and complete the form if they have one. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brandy.
Hi, everyone. Today I am going to talk to you about how to read your internet access invoice. So this can seem like a daunting task, especially depending on how complicated the invoice is. And the complicated part of it, of course, is determining what month is your invoice even for, what charges can you request for reimbursement from USAC, and another big question is, are there any ineligible charges that you can't include on that reimbursement request? Another item you want to look at on your invoice is the bandwidth. You'd want to ensure that it matches your contract. matches what you have requested on the Form 471. I understand that some are not under contract. It's a month-to-month service. So that is, just due diligence, looking back at your the bid that you received from the provider, just ensuring that all of that matches up. It definitely doesn't hurt, it helps. So one of the other things we're going to talk about is, are there any charges that appear out of the ordinary? This sometimes happens. Sometimes you miss it, but we want to make sure that you see it, and you can reach out to your provider and have them remove it if it's something that they've been including that they shouldn't be. So we're going to cover a couple of those things today. Okay, so on this first invoice, the first thing I want to talk about is in last month's webinar, we had a question. And that question was, do my bill dates have to be from the first day of the month to the last day of the month? If you look at the invoice billing period that I have highlighted in purple, you can see that this invoice clearly is not from the first day of the month to the last day of the month. And that is actually more common. So what you want to make sure is that you are consistent across the board. So you may say, you know what, I think this is a January invoice. Somebody may say, because it ends in February, I'm going to call it a February bill. At the end of the day, none of that even matters as long as you're consistent. And essentially what we're trying to avoid is using the same bill for 2 different months of service. So the next thing we're going to look at is your current monthly charges and taxes and fees. I have highlighted these items in yellow. So the way that I do it, and I'm trying to think about this in a way that it doesn't make it confusing. The easiest thing for me to do when I look at this bill is to identify the eligible charges, and those I have highlighted in yellow. I take those 2 charges and add them together, and that is the amount that I put for this month of service as the eligible fees. I've also highlighted the ineligible fee. Late fees are never an eligible charge when requesting reimbursement from USAC. Those will always need to be reduced from the bill. And the reason I talk about the way that I do it, because some people would look at this and say, well, I'll take the total amount and I'll reduce the late fee. But I think it's easier for a lot of people just to say, these 2 items I know are eligible, and this is what we're going to put down for our reimbursement. The last item you want to look at on here is your bandwidth. You want to ensure, like I said, that that matches what you have contracted with your service provider and matches what we've requested on the Form 471. The next invoice we're going to look at, I'm sure a lot of you recognize it as AT&T. They tend to have a lot more line items on their invoices. So I wanted to be sure to bring that one in just to make sure we all understand what we're looking at. The first thing I want to point out is the arrow that I have above current charges on the left-hand side. I want to make sure that we are looking at the correct line here. If you look at the total amount due, you will see that that amount also includes the past due balance from the previous month. So we don't want to look at that total amount. We want to look at current charges. So we're going to look at invoice billing period again, because in this case, the majority of the service is in January. And like I said, everybody's going to look at it a little bit different. You just make sure in your mind that you have straight what billing month this is, and just be consistent through the remainder of the funding year. Now, AT&T has multiple line item charges for internet access. And if you've ever looked at an AT&T contract, it is going to be hard to determine what exactly those charges are. But I feel like on the invoice, it's a little bit simpler. So they always have their ADI access charge. And in this case, it's $899.99. And then they have a bandwidth charge of $358.40. We want to look at both of those line items as the internet charge for service. Another item that we add to that can be the federal access recovery fee. That falls under taxes and other fees. That is an eligible charge for this service. So when adding those line items together, you would come up with the monthly billing amount for this month. I do want to point out the ineligible charge that I've highlighted on here. This is not an eligible charge. It's an add-on service for monthly site maintenance. But I also want to point out that this charge is not included in the contract for this library. This charge was added to their bill by mistake. And so that's something that we caught and have done the outreach to AT&T to have it removed and have that credited back to the library. However, this is a lot easier for you to catch from the get-go. So make sure you're looking at your bills very closely. And I've also got an arrow here pointing out the bandwidth. 250 meg for internet access, just double checking. I know I sound like a broken record, but you just want to make sure that that all matches, because USAC is going to look at that. If there's ever an invoice review or anything like that, they will look at these items on your bill. And of course, if you have any questions about your invoices, how to read them, anybody on the LCT team is happy to help you look at those. So don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm going to pass it on to Jennifer.
Thank you, Brandy, and hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about your invoicing deadlines and 486 deadlines. So as a reminder, for funding year 2019, if you have not received any reimbursement, the deadline is June 25th of 2021. So that's coming up. It's right around the corner. So if you need help with that, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and we can help you. But that is a hard deadline for you for 2019. So to get the money back, it needs to be done by then. Upcoming for the year, funding year 2020, which is ending June 30th of 2021, if you paid your invoices in full, you'll want to start gathering all those bills and submit the bear. And that deadline is October 28, 2021. So you still have time, but we want to make sure that it's on your radar and you don't miss it. And then a few of the libraries have filed for Category 2 services, and that deadline is January 28th of 2022. And your Form 486 deadline. So that's coming up for this funding year that we just got done filing for, so July 1st, 2021. The purpose of this form is notifying USAC that your services start on July 1 or have started after July 1. It also certifies compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act. So if you receive your funding commitment decision letter by July 1st, you will have to file your Form 486 and certify it by October 29, 2021. If you receive your funding commitment decision letter after July 1st, you have 120 days to file your Form 486 and certify it. If you have questions, again, please reach out to us and we can help guide you through that. And now I will pass it off to Kyle.
I will add real quick, to the 486 deadline, to what Jennifer said. You know, this deadline is, as you can see, it's kind of a moving target depending on when you receive your funding commitment decision letter. If you fail to meet this deadline, there are pretty substantial recourse. So just be sure that you're watching this deadline. The safest thing to do with your 486s is as soon as you do see your funding commitment decision letter announcing that you've been funded for what you requested, go ahead immediately and file your 486. That's kind of just two steps, both together. If you can remember to do that, you will keep yourself from getting any kind of docked E-rate funding. So if you're late filing this form, although there is a 15-day grace period, what USAC will do is they will adjust your service start date of when they'll cover, when E-rate services are covered. They'll adjust that from July 1 and they'll backdate it to 120 days from the date that you actually submit your late 486. So it's pretty significant. We've seen people unfortunately forget it and they lose all their funding. So it's something that you want to keep up with.
I also want to add something. So some libraries who started with the LCT project this year for this funding year, and this is the first year the libraries filed for internet access discounts from E-rate. If this is the first year the libraries participated in the program, you may be able to take steps to be compliant with the Children's Internet Protection Act. So if you are on this call and you're one of those libraries that this is the first year and perhaps you may not be quite ready, you're working on getting your filter or you're working on your internet safety policy, that's okay, and we can help you with that. The certifications on the 486 can be tricky, so if this is your first year filing, make sure you pay attention to those and check the right box. Or actually, all of you, make sure you check the right box. Because if you have been participating in the program and you check the wrong certification, could delay the processing of your 486. So just pay attention to the certifications and you'll be fine. So.
Thank you, Caroline. So to discuss future steps for funding year 2022, we're a bit of a ways off from the funding year 2022, but now is a great time to start considering, the future of internet at your library. For example, think about your internet contract and when it expires. If the contract expires before the end of funding year 2022, which will be June 30th of 2023, you should file a Form 470 for funding year 2022. And you can file a Form 470 for funding year 2022 as early as July of this year. So start thinking about if you do need to file a new Form 470 for funding year 2022. Also consider if you would like to file a Form 470 for Category 2 equipment and services. Any networking equipment that may need to be refreshed or upgraded to, facilitate a higher bandwidth that you're bringing to the library. Many libraries over the past year have needed to increase their bandwidth under COVID considerations. And sometimes that requires upgraded equipment to help facilitate that throughput. So think about what your library needs for Category 2 equipment going forward for this upcoming funding year, in addition to any increased bandwidth you may need for the upcoming funding year. And now is a great time to just start planning for it. Next, we wanted to welcome again Jennifer and Patty, who are going to be joining the LCT support team here. Jennifer and Patty. Jennifer, did you want to give us a little bit of information about your background?
Sure. So I've been working in E-rate for almost 8 years. I came from another consulting firm. Worked primarily with Oklahoma schools and libraries, but dabbled a little bit in Texas. And I moved to Texas about 3 years ago and happy to be here. It's lots of fun. I know it's a moving target with E-rate, and that's what keeps it interesting. So I'm looking forward to being on this team.
Great. And Patty, do you have anything you'd like to share with us about your background?
Yes. Hi, I am new to the E-rate Central team, but I'm not new to E-rate. I've been doing E-rate for the past 9 years. mainly with Texas schools. So I am very excited to join with the library team.
Great. And as part of Jennifer and Patty joining us here in Libraries Connecting Texas, we'll just want to make sure that our LCT library participants add them as users in the EPIC portal, in addition to assigning them the full rights to access each of the forms except for the Form 498. If you have any questions about doing this, please let us know and we can reach out to you with more detailed instructions. But on this slide, we have the basic set of instructions for adding both Jennifer and Patty as users and assigning those rights to better help them to help you in your library filing for E-rate. And I believe now I'll pass it off to Caroline to close us off.
I'll add something, Kyle. We've noticed a couple of libraries may not have added all of the team members that you see here today. So if you notice that any of us are missing as users in your EPIC account, please go ahead and add us as well, anybody that's missing.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you, Kyle. So exactly, and I think what we'll do with our next newsletter, we'll send you some instructions again on how to make sure that all of us are in your portal as full users, and also send instructions. I'd now like to open up the floor for questions. If you have a question, you can unmute, you can raise your hand and we can let you talk, or you can ask questions in the chat and we'll answer them. But just want to make sure that if any of you have any questions about what we discussed today, such as how to look at your bill, or what else you might need to do when you're preparing your bears, that's something that we're here to answer questions, and now is a good time because everyone can benefit from each other's questions if there are any. Not seeing any questions. Oh, wait, there's George. George has a question. George, what's your question? You can unmute.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, when you're entering your dollar amounts in the BEAR program, do you have to use decimal points or don't use decimal points?
So when you do your bear, it's a really good question, George. What we tend to do is we'll send you a template that you can use to calculate your bears. If you're creating a bear on a month-to-month basis, or a quarterly basis, or an annual basis, you can either just calculate it up to the next dollar amount if you choose, but you can use dollars and cents. So if your total amount that's eligible is $1,000.25, then you can put $1,000.25. When you're entering the figure into the bear, if it's a round amount, it probably is fine, but you would tend to put the decimal point in there if it does have dollars and cents. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other questions about bears? So, and the subject of the bears and spies again, this is an important thing to remind you about as well. If you have received your funding commitment decision letter, which is most of you, then it's really important to make sure that your service provider knows what method you want to use in getting your discounts. So if you received an email from your service provider with a link to fill out a form, then you need to go ahead and complete that form and submit it. I know that AT&T sends out an email, and so does Windstream, and some other large service providers as well will send out something that says, do you want SPY or BEAR, and how much is eligible and how much is ineligible, and then you have to fill out the form and submit it. This is something you should do now, because July 1st is when you are eligible to start receiving your discounts. If you get this done now, then when July gets here, your first bill can be discounted. If you don't do it, then you'll maybe having to pay your bill in full. So we don't want that to happen. Now, if you're going to be filing BEARs, then of course you have to pay your BEAR and your bill in full. But if you're doing a SPY, make sure your service provider knows. And also make sure, we're going to be reminding you of your deadlines, so pay attention to the deadlines, because we don't want to miss any. So I don't see any other questions. Again, you can always reach out to us using lct@eratecentral.com or call our LCT hotline at 516-801-7820. And have a great rest of the week, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.